Hey guys, in this video I want to talk a little bit about resistors and some of the options that are available to you, the brand, the wattage, the tolerances and all that sort of stuff, and actually take a physical look at a cheap, a really cheap resistor compared to one that's an actual brand, a branded resistor, and just, you know, throw the information out to you so you can decide what you think is best for your particular situation. So let's go to the bench and I'll get a few that I have on hand out so we can have a look at them. Here's a few random resistors I pulled out of my stuff. So the example I'm using here, the reason why I picked these ones is for the body color. So you can see this one's beige, light blue, grey and green. The body color represents what the material of the resistor is actually made of. So if you look up on Google inside a resistor or something like that and have a look at the images, you'll see there's a material inside. Some are made a little differently depending on the era of the resistor and the type, but generally it's either a solid piece of material that runs across from one lead to the other, or a coil that goes around, and obviously the thickness of the coil and the material will determine how much resistance the resistor offers. So carbon film generally is 5% tolerance and metal film is generally 1% tolerance. You're not going to see these two down here. I just wanted to show you those to show you that there are actually other materials out there that you can use. I think the metal oxide resistors, which I'm pretty sure is the green one, is mainly used in applications that are sort of hot environments, so maybe power supplies or something like that. So that they would pay extra for a resistor that's made from a different material than these two, so that the tolerance stays the same and doesn't drift and all that sort of stuff. So you won't see those two though. For pedal building, you're just never going to see those two. You're going to see blue and the blue metal film and the beige carbon film. So the blue metal film is 1% and the carbon film is 5%. Doesn't matter with guitar pedals. Excuse me, I got a bit of a cold. I think that in my entire guitar pedal building adventure, there's only ever been maybe one or two situations where the tolerance actually mattered. I needed something that was accurate. So basically, it doesn't really matter too much. I mean, if you're building an overdrive or a boost or something that's just really just a basic analog pedal, 5% makes no difference. In fact, I reckon if you made a pedal with metal film and made another pedal with carbon film, you probably wouldn't tell the difference. And if you did tell the difference, which one's better than the other, you know, it's kind of just like a sort of, I don't know, sort of like a floating target that you're trying to hit. There's no, you don't need to pinpoint an actual sound, if you know what I mean. So usually either of them matter, but these days resistors are so cheap that you'll probably end up getting mainly metal film. Most people offer metal film these days. You can still see carbon film around. I have a few on my web store in the 1 meg plus. I'm actually going to be phasing those out, so they're all metal film. But again, it doesn't really matter, but I know that most people want metal film because accuracy, you know, like people want things that are resistors that are accurate. Would prefer the resistors are accurate, so I'm just sort of slowly changing those over. But either of those are good, but you're probably going to end up with metal film most of the time. You'll also notice that the carbon film's actually got 4 color bands and the metal film's got 5. These are different value kind of, I don't know, standards, I guess you'd say. I'm pretty sure the 4 is E12 and the 5 is E24. All it means is the more bands that you have on there, obviously there's going to be more values available. So if you're using E24 resistors, you'll have a lot more values available than you will if you have E12, because you can't, there's not as many combinations for the colors for E12 as there is for E24. So you'll find if you look up look up a manufacturer's data sheet on an E12 and E24 resistors and have a look at the values available. You'll find there's a lot more for the E24 than there is for the E12. For guitar pedals, I don't know. You might come in a situation where you actually need E24, but you can get carbon film in E24 as well. This particular carbon film just has E12, the E12 bands on it. So again, it doesn't really matter that much, but just in case you're wondering why one's got more bands than the other, that is the actual reason. And if you want to look up the value for either of these, you can either do it the old school way, which is, and I'll just move the camera around, let me do this. You can use a resistor color code chart. I have this on the side of my desk because when I'm packing orders and things, if I accidentally pick up a resistor, I go, oh, hang on, is that not right? I can just quickly check the colors and make sure that I've actually picked up the right resistor. And as you'll also notice, I'm also a good listener. Or you can just look up on Google like something like 4-band resistor color code chart, or maybe leave the word chart off, and you'll come up with plenty of websites that actually have like interactive drop-down boxes, and you just pick, it says first color band, second color band, third color band, fourth color band. And just take note too that sometimes with some particular resistors you can actually come up with 2 values depending on which direction you're going in. Usually the tolerance usually is going to be brown. Brown is 1%. Gold is 5%. I'm going off memory here. Actually, why don't I look at my color chart here? Yeah, brown is 1%, gold is 5%, and silver is 10%. So you're going to probably find gold and brown mainly. So brown is actually a value, so you could actually count that probably the wrong way, but it'll come up with a very strange number though. I've done it a few times in the past and it usually comes up with a weird number, so just take note of that if you're counting it in the wrong way. So that's pretty much, so that's how you can read them. Obviously the other way is to use a multimeter, of course. That's 3 ways: the color chart, the interactive drop-down boxes on on the web. You can just put in the colors on that and it will tell you what the value is, or a multimeter. So next I want to talk about the actual wattage of the resistors. And as you can see, I've added a couple of new resistors to the stack. So the one down the bottom here, believe it or not, I'm sure I had some 1/2 watt resistors around, but I can't seem to find them at the moment. So this was actually the only other resistor I could find that I actually have on hand that's larger than 1/4 watt, because you're not gonna, for guitar pedals, you're not normally gonna need anything larger than 1/4 watt. You may need a 1/2 watt if you're building a power supply for a guitar pedal or something specific like that. But generally, you're probably only going to use 1/4 watt. Sometimes you might even use an 1/8 of a watt, but I don't see the point in that, and I'll tell you why in a moment. So this is a 1 watt resistor, and as you can see, the actual physical size is getting a lot bigger. The leads are a lot chunkier. Then these are all just, I can't remember if I said or not, but these 4 in the middle are all 1/4 watt. And what is this one? You'd probably think maybe it's an 1/8 of a watt, because it's certainly an 1/8 of a watt size. That's usually what size they are. It's actually not. It's a 1/4 watt as well. I found it's a TE, the brand is TE Connectivity. They have a range that is 1/8 watt size, but 1/4 watt power rating, which I thought was awesome. It was a great idea. You could use tiny resistors in place of bigger ones. You can use them anywhere, tight spaces, whatever you like, but they still have the power handling of a 1/4 watt resistor. However, these are on my web store. However, they are very unpopular, and just nobody buys them for some reason. I just don't know why, but I've got those on sale at the moment. I'm actually clearing them out and trying to make room for some other stuff, because no one buys them. I'm not quite sure why. Why people don't like them. Maybe they just sort of see them and think that they're 1/8 of a watt, but they're actually 1/4 watt. So if you want to buy them, you can get them from suppliers and stuff. If you want to get those ones, they're TE Connectivity. Can't remember the actual series, but I'm sure if you look up TE Connectivity 1/4 watt resistor, you'll probably see one that's really tiny like that, and you'll be able to work out what the actual series is. So as you can see, generally speaking, the more power handling ability the resistor has, the larger they get. Don't buy 1 watt resistors for if you're building a, you know, fuzz face, because you're probably not going to fit it on your PCB. I mean, if you're doing, I suppose, if you're doing, actually this leads into the next point I was going to make. If you're doing a point-to-point fuzz face or something like that, then maybe you will use 1 watt, because they're actually easier to solder on because they've got nice thick leads. Personally, this is something else I wanted to talk about, and it just happened to roll into that quite well. I don't particularly like thin lead ones. I'll put up with those because of the physical size of the resistor, and the fact that they still are 1/4 watt resistors. But this one is also 1/4 watt, and it's got these, you know, these thin little leads on it. Don't really like them. I found that they can snap if with too much handling, or, you know, like maybe if you're soldering through on the back side of a board and you're pulling it through with some pliers, they snap. They just, I don't know. I don't think they're robust enough for me. Some people could not care at all, and that, you know, they are experienced pedal builders. They just don't care whether they got thick leads or not, and I totally understand that. It doesn't happen very often that something like that would happen. But I don't know. I just like the thicker lead resistors, just because they're more robust, and you can use them off board as well, like I was saying with point to point. If you were doing point to point, or if you're, like, for instance, adding a resistor to a current limiting resistor to a LED, and you're soldering directly onto the LED lead, something with a bit more substance to it is probably preferable than something that's sort of flimsy like this. These are cheap resistors from a very popular supplier. I'm not going to say who they are, because I don't want to badmouth them. But yeah, that's the sort of resistor you get from them. You probably can have if you've been in the guitar pedal building scene for any period of time, you probably know who I'm talking about. Yeah, they're really flimsy. I used to use them all the time. I just thought to myself, the other thing too is, like, when I'm actually building something physically, and this might sound a bit, pedantic, but this is just me. When I'm building something, if I'm using quality components, I just sort of feel like I'm putting more time and attention into the actual build than if I'm just using, you know, like kind of junky stuff. You know, like it's, I suppose you could sort of use that sort of philosophy for life. You know, do you want a heap of junk, or do you want something that's a bit better made? And when you're talking about a 1 cent resistor to something that's a bit more substantial, which might be 5 cents, I just don't see the point. Really, 4 cents. I mean, is it really worth the worry? I might check those with a multimeter too. We'll just see what the tolerance is like. Fairly certain you won't need to worry about these, even though they are cheap. The only real disadvantage is those leads, I reckon. For me personally, the actual tolerance of the resistor will be the same. So just to put it in comparison, this is a very popular brand that people use, Zycon, and they're pretty comparable to the ones I have on my store. They're not Zycon, they're a house brand for a supplier that I use. I found them a long time ago. I thought, you know what, these are cheap and they're pretty good. I'll just pull one out. So that's not Zycon, it's the house brand. You can actually see that they're slightly smaller on the lead, but they're very similar in quality. I'm actually swapping over to Zycons now. I've only got a couple of values at the moment, but as they sell out, I'll just replace them with Zycons, because I don't know, they're just so good. You know, like quality wise, I think they're really good. So you can see the difference between the two. The body is actually smaller on that one. Body's a little bit bigger on this one, and the lead is stronger as well, and thicker. For the reasons I said, they're probably personal reasons. You know, some people don't care whether they've got thick leads or not. I do. It's just me. Maybe we'll have a look at the actual tolerances for a few of these. So I'll grab a bunch of Zycons and measure them, and then we'll measure some from the cheap supplier and see if they're the same. Like I said, I do not doubt that they will both be accurate, but this would be an interesting test all the same. So let's start with the cheapies here. See if I can do this behind the camera. It's kind of tricky to grab it. So the first one is, I don't know what value this is, but we're going to work out So it's 390 ohm, and it's almost dead on 390 ohm. See that little discrepancy on the end there, the 1.3 ohms could actually be the inaccuracy with the actual multimeter, not the resistor. You know, you don't know. They're not perfectly accurate, but I mean, there you go. I mean, they're pretty close. It's certainly within 1%. So 1% of that would be 3.9 ohms. That's and that can go plus or minus. So you know, we're looking between, yeah, well, 390 minus 3.9 and plus 3.9 is what the value needs to be between to be within spec, and they all are. That one's almost dead on. That's pretty close. And last one. So that one's pretty close as well. So as far as the actual the tolerances go, those ones are fine. So let's have a look at some Zycons now and see if they are the same. Maybe they'll be worse. So here's 5. They are 100K value. So let's have a look. If I can hold it down. So that's pretty close. So for 100K, you're looking at what's the 1K. So it's got to be between 99K and 101K. And as you can see, those two are very accurate. Actually, maybe even slightly more accurate than the other cheap ones so far. That's pretty close. I'd have to use a calculator and work it out, but I mean, yeah, those are all pretty close. Yeah, again, really close. So maybe slightly actually more accurate. The Zycons, does it matter with guitar pedal building? Nope, it certainly doesn't. It doesn't need to be ultra accurate. Nice to know that they are accurate, but doesn't really matter. Like I said before, you can even use 5% resistors, carbon film resistors. And if you want to see one of those, actually, I'll just measure that. I've got one on. I'll measure that one that's on the paper. Just so you can actually see a 5% resistor and the tolerance. So that is, so what is this value? It's green, which is, green is 5. I'm looking at my chart here, which is why I've got it next to me, because it's really good to have. And it's blue, which is 6. So it should actually be 5.6 ohms, and then gold, which is, I guess, gold should be actually, gold's a multiplier, so the multiplier is 0.1 ohm multiplier, which means you go back. See, if you didn't have the gold band and you had a 0, then it would actually be 39 ohms, I think. I don't usually use resistors this low. I think it'd be 39 ohms, so you actually have to move the digit back one. So it's 3.9 ohms. Sorry, 3.6 ohms. 5.6 ohms. So it's actually 5.9 ohms. So you can see that that's got a bigger. The tolerance is much looser on that resistor. Again, doesn't matter for guitar pedals. Not unless it's hugely out, like 10% or something like that, and then you probably have cause to start to sort of worry a bit. But 1%, 5% doesn't make any difference. Zycons are great. They're always, as you can see, they're pretty much. I used to measure all my components before I actually put them in circuit, just to make sure that the way I figured it was, if I put a component in a pedal and it's not, and there's something wrong with it, or the value is totally whacked out for whatever reason, or I've picked up the wrong component, it's gonna be difficult to find later on. Not so much the picking up of the wrong component, because you can see the bands on it, but if there was something wrong with the component, I'd have a lot of trouble trying to find it later on. So I used to measure everything before I actually soldered it into circuit, into the actual PCB, which is probably a good habit if you're new to building guitar pedals. I haven't done that for a long time, but I used to do that all the time when I built guitar pedals. You know, like a lot. I'd be checking them, and I mean, even when I build them now, I do double check sometimes just to make sure that I'm using the right component. So that's a little bit about resistors. If you in the market for resistors, I probably should give myself a plug. Obviously, I have tons of different values on my store. I've got boxes and boxes of resistors up above, but these are the ones I have on hand that I can grab quickly. I've got tons of values. Like I said, changing those over to Zycon now, they're not a huge amount better than what I've got at the moment. The house brand resistors, they're pretty good too. I've been using them for years and years, and they're always pretty accurate. And they're similar quality to Zycon, but I'm moving suppliers because this supplier's giving me the heebie-jeebies. So I'm just going, that's it, I've had enough of you, and I'm moving on to somebody else. And and Zycon seem to be the way to go at the moment. So yeah, they'll start to be replaced. I don't think you'd tell the difference between my house brand ones and the Zycons anyway. I doubt you'd even notice the difference, but anyway. So yeah, that's that. And obviously, if you want to buy these yourself, you just look up. You can do a bit of research on Zycon. A lot of pedal builders use Zycon. They're just a good, not overly expensive resistor. You can pay a lot of money for a resistor. Some of the highly accurate, highly precise resistors, you don't need that for a guitar pedal. There's just no need. Some, like I said, there are a few situations where you do. But usually when you're building something like that, on the build doc it'll tell you, make sure you use make sure you use a resistor that is close to, or a capacitor that is close to, as you can find. So you just go through, you've got 20 of them, you just find the one that's the closest. Can have an important effect. I think in clocks for BBDs, I think there's a capacitor that you need to get one that's pretty close, but it's not common that's needed. So yeah, don't worry too much about that. Anyway, I think I've probably talked enough, and that is mainly the things I wanted to talk about. I think I've covered everything I wanted to talk about. So yeah, hope you found that interesting. Got any questions, leave them in the comments below. I'll try and respond, or other people might jump in and help you out as well. If you need resistors, check out my store, of course. There's another plug, and I'll end it with that. Thank you very much for watching, and don't forget to subscribe. Cheers.